Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Happy Couples. We are your hosts, Nardine
and Vitalij. And on today's episode, guys, we want to talk to you about something that a lot of couples experience. Some of them have a much more difficulties dealing with those things, and it's specifically fair fighting, because every couple goes through those kind of things.
Yeah, so what we're hoping to do is give you some tips in terms of how to fight effectively, how to fight fairly. And I think one of the things that sometimes come up for couples is that some couples avoid fighting because maybe from their past experience with their families that fighting often led to physical violence, or maybe fighting meant that their parents would get a divorce. And so there's that for some people. There's that negative connotation in terms of fighting, so they may just avoid it. But it doesn't really help to solve anything. I think it actually harms the relationship more.
Right. And I personally grew up with having some experiences where fighting wasn't necessarily a pleasant thing. And growing up as a kid, growing up with these insecurities always, and then when you become an adult, and if there is a disagreement or there's a fight, you always think about, okay, this is not a good thing and it's really going to end up badly. So on today's episode, guys, we actually things that we personally learned. We're going to share maybe some of the things from our experience, but at the same time, from a professional standpoint, what we think and what the fair fighting is. So without further ado, let's dive in.
Yes. So the first topic, the first step of fair fighting is don't interrupt each other. So what does that mean? When you're having a conversation, when you're in a disagreement, the goal is to hear your partner, to hear and understand them, not necessarily to vent or necessarily to get your anger out. If that's your goal, then you're not going to go anywhere. But the goal is to, present the issue and come up with a solution. So the best way to do that is not to interrupt the other person and allow them to express their thoughts and feelings.
And sometimes when emotions are high and you're trying to prove to your spouse that this is not how you feel, this is not how things turn out, interrupting can really cause some of that friction. So do your best not interrupt your spouse. And the second one is, whenever you're having conversation, you want to make sure that you're maintaining this emotional control. You don't lead yourself into all kinds of other baggage, or you try to control your feelings, and along those things, your partner, your spouse will be able to actually hear you out. When you're yelling or raising voices, and any of those kind of things can cause some of that additional friction that you want to avoid when you're having a fight.
Yeah, and I think that it can happen at any time during a disagreement, because when tension get high, people can just feel like, especially when you start seeing those signs of elevated voices and you start feeling like, things are getting higher and higher, that's when you know that, let me step back because I'm out of control right now. And so that's not going to lead to effective communication at that point. And so the third step is no name calling. So this is really important. When you are trying to be heard, if you start with putting your spouse down and calling them names, that can lead to further hurt in the relationship on top of whatever the issue is going on presently. It's just gonna harm the relationship even more if there's any types of put downs or name calling in there. So no name calling.
And that specifically would also relate to things like, describing a spouse and saying, well, you are just like your father, or you are like your mother, or you are like your brother or somebody. That kind of carries a negative connotation with describing him or her. And so name calling can really be detrimental to a relationship, because now you stop seeing them as your loved one, as your close one, but rather kind of associating them with just an object of negativity, or a person that you may have a negative history with. So no name calling, no put downs, none of those things.
Yep.
Now, the next one is whenever you're having a conversation and all of a sudden you feel like, okay, my spouse is not hearing me, or she is just so stubborn, and you throw your towel and you say, okay, I'm leaving. All right, so we want to encourage you, try not to walk out on your spouse, because it kind of shows a disrespectful attitude toward him or her, or you feel like, okay, you had enough and then you just want to drop it.
Yeah. And obviously there is a time to maybe take a breather in terms of when things escalate to a point where it's not productive. And I think that the important step is to actually verbalize it and say, I need some time. And that's pretty much brings us to our next topic. Our next step is taking a break. When you feel like things are getting too intense, when you feel like you're unable to control your emotions, it's totally okay to say, you know what, we need to take a break in order to calm down, in order to communicate more effectively. But I think the key to that is actually communicating the fact that you need to take a break, as opposed to just walking out on your spouse.
The following topic, the following type of thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to get physical. And now, because when you become physical, at this point, you're really kind of breaking all kinds of rules. Yes, it is a fighting. Yes, you kind of, although sometimes the misconception is, okay, I need to win the fight. Okay, so, but that's not the case. Really, be able to have fair fighting is to simply resolve the conflict, resolve the issue that you might be having with your partner. And when somebody gets physical, now all of a sudden you're trying to become a bully, and you're trying to show to your partner or spouse that, okay, you are stronger than he or she is. And maybe probably tendency for men to become more physical than women, although women get physical too. Yeah. They start throwing plates and knives, and hopefully not knives.
Right.
But obviously, please try not to get physical. If it gets to this point, you may have some, possibly even police get involved. Really try to keep law enforcement at bay and have them
at all cost.
Have them be involved in some other things rather than your relationship.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that we cannot stress this enough in terms of not allowing things to escalate to the place where they're physical. And I think obviously if things are getting physical, you're aware that there are much deeper issues that need to be addressed. And I think that's when you know that, okay, maybe we need outside help at this point. So if any of those signs are present, that's a red flag that you need outside help.
I guess that's a anger management class.
Well, it could be so many different things. It could be anger management. It could be couples therapy. So there's so many ways that you can go with that. But I think the point is that you will need some professional help outside of that if there's any signs of physical violence.
No blaming. Try to stick to the facts. Let's say if you're talking about dirty sink, stick to a dirty sink. Try not to bring things like, okay, he or she left the dirty clothes, or did not fold laundry, or did not push start button on wash machine. Really try to stick to the facts. Try not to bring maybe kids or the past or something happened last week, because then it becomes a snowball, and really very conversation is really gaining its own traction and really jumping on a different track and leading you somewhere else. So sticking to facts really helps to really address the issue at hand.
Yeah, and I think the other part about blaming is that a lot of times if you're blaming the other person, you don't take responsibility for your own part in whatever the situation may be. So it's easy to sort of like put it on your spouse or your partner. And I think that what blaming does is says, well, you are the problem, as opposed to both of you taking ownership of what's going on and trying to work together to resolve the issue.
The next step, guys, is to try not to generalize whenever you're describing the situation, whenever you're thinking about or trying to bring up the issue that you've been observing, and all of a sudden you say, you always do that, or she never sees this, or she always say those kind of things. Because when you generalize, what happens to the other person?
I think what happens is that the person ends up feeling just really, I think it's another way of put down. You know, they don't feel very great about themselves. And if you're saying, well, you never do this, that, you know, like it would leave me feeling like, whoa, you know, like you don't think much of me if you feel like I never do certain things or I'm always doing that. So I feel like it kind of leaves me feeling a little hurt, and it attacks the person's character, basically, when there's that always or never. Anytime there's any of those absolutes that are there, it really leaves the person feeling hurt because their characters are attacked. And the next step is what?
There's really no any other next steps. Everything we just listed, you know, they don't have specifically any level of priority. It's something for you to just simply be mindful of whenever you having a conversation, or whenever you know, okay, this is no longer a conversation, it's actually turning into a fight. And you want to be able to have those ground rules set in place whenever you're having a discussion. Maybe it would be a good time to even have the discussion with your partner ahead of time. One of the things that we do is have a one-on-one time. And whenever you having a one-on-one time with your spouse, just bring this topic about fair fighting, making sure that you not necessarily want to win the fight, but you really want to address the issue. And these are some of the ground rules that will help you to deal with that.
Yes, and I think that just as a reminder that every couple fight, that's normal. That I just want to make sure that normalize that we all experience that, but it's just how we go about fighting that's gonna either strengthen your relationship or even make it worse, because being able to fight fairly can actually strengthen your relationship. Because what happens is that you're two different people, you have two different sets of values, and you're going to clash. And if there's something that comes up that you both disagree on, if you can sit down and actually work them through, what that does to your relationship, it helps you to connect even more emotionally, and you grow, because this is now another area you've learned about each other, and now you know how to go about it without getting into a fight. So there are, benefits to fighting. Who knew?
And if you try whole lots of things at this point, and you try to be respectful, and you try to not call names, no name calling, and nothing seems to be working out, our advice is simply seek professional help at this point. Get advice with a local counselor wherever you live, and help them listen to you and maybe give you some guidance, because sometimes issues can become so deep and it's so difficult to get to the bottom of it that professional counseling really becomes an only solution to the situation. And
there's no shame. I think that there's always this type of shame for people to seek counseling. They may feel like, well, we're not that bad. I think that's some of the things I would hear sometimes, that people, we're not that bad. And what happens is that they wait until things build up, when it's at its worst. That's when people actually seek counseling. There's actually research out there that says that people wait an average of 6 years from when they start having significant concerns in their relationship to actually seek a therapist or a counselor. So I think that people wait for the last possible when things are at their worst. And it actually is harder to work on when you're actually at your worst, if that's when you're seeking help. So I cannot stress this enough in terms of when you see those things are not happening and you cannot resolve them on your own, it is really important to seek help outside of the two of you, because sometimes you just need a third party.
So guys, we hope that this content is helpful to you. What we're trying to do is bring very useful content to our viewers, because we recognize a relationship is really a hallmark of anybody else's life. Yes, we love our jobs, we love our careers and kids, but relationship with your spouse is so vital in any marriage, in any dynamic, that having a healthy relationship is very awesome.
And if you are looking for a local counselor, check out the information below, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.